The room tightens before anyone says a word. Cameras glide into position like predators sensing blood in the water. The applause sign flashes, but the clapping arrives half a second late, uneven, uncertain, like the audience already knows something is off. Johnny Depp sits there with that familiar half-smile, the kind that usually disarms a room. Today it doesn't quite land. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg watches without blinking, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, measuring. The air hums. Something is about to happen. Before we drop any deeper into this moment, before the silence snaps, hit subscribe to Fame and Frame, tap that like button, and tell us in the comments what you think this interview is about to become. Trust me, you're going to want to be part of this conversation. The opening theme fades, and the studio lights burn hotter than usual. Johnny adjusts his rings, metal softly clicking against metal, a nervous habit he doesn't bother hiding. He's been on 1,000 stages, faced down paparazzi storms, courtroom glare, global judgment. But this feels different. This isn't a premiere. There's no script here. No character to slip into. Just him, a couch, and a panel that has ended careers with nothing more than a question delivered the wrong way. Whoopi leans back, folds her hands. She's done this longer than most people in the building have been alive. She knows how tension works. You don't rush it. You let it breathe. Joy Behar cracks a joke to warm the crowd. Laughter ripples, polite and brief, then fades too quickly. The sound dies like it hit a wall. Johnny chuckles, nods, but his eyes flick, just for a second, toward Whoopi. He knows where the gravity in this room lives. The host introduces him, listing the films, the awards, the reinvention, the comeback narrative everyone loves. Johnny listens like he's heard it all before, because he has. But underneath the practiced calm, something churns. His shoulders are loose, but his jaw is set. He's braced. Whoopi finally speaks, her voice calm, low, and deceptively gentle. Johnny, it's good to see you. There it is. Simple, neutral, and somehow heavier than any accusation. Good to be here, he replies, tipping his head. His accent softens the words, wraps them in charm, but it can't mask the tension crawling just beneath his skin. For a moment they talk about art, about creativity, about disappearing into roles. Johnny warms to this. He talks with his hands, paints images in the air. The audience leans in. This is the Johnny they remember, the one who can make even silence sound poetic. But Whoopi doesn't interrupt. She lets him talk. She lets him settle into comfort. And that's when the shift happens. It's subtle, so subtle most people watching live don't clock it until later. Whoopi straightens. Not much. Just enough. Her eyes narrow a fraction. The temperature drops. You've said, she begins carefully, that the last few years changed how you see Hollywood, changed how you see people. Johnny pauses. The word people hangs there unfinished, loaded. He smiles again, but this time it's slower. Measured. Yeah, he says. I think when you go through something publicly, you learn who's real. A murmur moves through the audience. Phones shift and lapse. Somewhere backstage, a producer stiffens. Whoopi nods. And when you say real, do you mean loyal or silent? The question slices clean. No filler. No joke to cushion it. Johnny blinks once. Twice. For a heartbeat, he considers deflecting. You can almost see the calculation. He's done this dance. Say something vague. Thank the fans. Move on. But something about the way Whoopi asked it, calm, direct, unflinching, pins him in place. I mean, he starts then stops. Clears his throat. I mean people who don't rush to judgment. There it is. Judgment. The word lands hard. Whoopi doesn't react. That's what makes it dangerous. She simply tilts her head. And what about accountability? The audience exhales as one. A low collective sound. Johnny's fingers tighten, rings pressing into skin. Accountability matters, he says slowly. But so does truth. Now the tension is visible. You can feel it vibrate through the studio floor, through the camera lenses, through the viewers at home who sit up a little straighter without knowing why. Joy glances at Whoopi, sensing the shift. Sunny Hostin leans forward, curious, cautious. The producers don't cut. They don't dare. Whoopi's voice stays even. Sometimes truth looks different depending on where you're sitting. Johnny's smile fades. Not all at once. It slips, like a mask losing its grip. And sometimes, he replies, truth is buried under headlines. A beat. 2. The silence stretches, thick and deliberate. This is no longer promotion. This is something else. The audience doesn't clap. They're afraid to break it. Whoopi studies him. Not as a fan. Not as an adversary. As something closer to a judge. Or maybe a mirror. Do you feel misunderstood? She asks. Johnny laughs, sharp and humorless. I think that's putting it lightly. That laugh, too quick, too edged, changes the energy completely. It's the first crack in the glass. Whoopi doesn't smile back. A lot of people felt hurt by what they saw, she says. By what they heard. And a lot of people believed things that weren't true. Johnny fires back faster now. The calm is slipping. That's the danger. The audience stirs. Someone gasps softly. This is live. There's no going back. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. So everyone else got it wrong. Johnny leans forward. The couch creaks under the shift of his weight. I'm saying it's complicated. Life usually is, Whoopi replies. But harm isn't always complicated. That lands like a punch. For a split second, Johnny looks away. His jaw clenches. When he looks back, his eyes are darker, stormier. With respect, he says, voice tightening. I don't think a talk show is the place to. Whoopi cuts in, smooth as glass. You came here. The words are soft. The impact is not. The audience reacts now. Audible, restless. This isn't a soundbite. This is a collision. Johnny exhales through his nose, a controlled release. I came here to talk about my work. And your work, Whoopi says, doesn't exist in a vacuum. There it is. The line in the sand. Cameras zoom in. Every twitch, every blink, broadcast to millions. Johnny's foot taps once, then stills. He forces a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. I've taken responsibility for my mistakes, he says. But I won't accept narratives that erase my side. Whoopi's gaze hardens just a shade. And others would say their side was erased too. The room feels smaller now. Like the walls are inching closer. Johnny opens his mouth, then closes it. The pause is long enough to feel intentional, heavy with unspoken words. When he speaks again, his voice is lower. This is exactly what I'm talking about. What's that? Whoopi asks. The assumption. And what's being assumed? She presses. That's when Johnny's restraint finally cracks. Not into shouting, not into chaos, but into something colder. That I'm the villain, he says quietly. The word echoes. Villain. A role he's played 100 times on screen. Now hovering uncomfortably close to reality. The audience is dead silent. Whoopi doesn't flinch. People aren't characters, Johnny. No, he agrees. But they get written that way. Another pause. The kind that makes producers sweat and viewers forget to breathe. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman nods. Somewhere else, someone shakes their head. The divide is visible, almost physical. Whoopi folds her hands again. Do you think fame protected you, or exposed you? Johnny laughs again, softer this time, but there's no humor in it. It did both. And power, she asks. What does that do? Johnny's eyes flash. Depends who's holding it. Now even the hosts shift uncomfortably. This isn't sparring anymore. This is escalation. Whoopi holds his gaze. And who held it here? That question hangs, dangerous and unresolved. Johnny leans back, finally breaking eye contact. He runs a hand through his hair, breathes in then out. When he looks up again, the charm is gone. What's left is raw. I think, he says slowly, that sometimes people want a simple story. A hero. A monster. And you don't fit. Whoopi asks. Johnny meets her eyes again. None of us do. The audience erupts, not in applause but in noise. Conflicted, overlapping reactions. The spell breaks, but the tension doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Whoopi nods once. That may be true. The cameras keep rolling. The clock ticks. And everyone in that studio knows. They're past the point of polite conversation now. This was just the beginning. The applause sign flickers, unsure of itself, then dies. No one claps anyway. The sound that fills the studio isn't approval or outrage, it's uncertainty. The kind that creeps into a room when people realize they're witnessing something that can't be neatly edited later. Johnny sits back, but the tension hasn't left him. It's settled into his shoulders, his jaw, the tight line of his mouth. Across from him, Whoopi doesn't move. She lets the moment stretch, because she understands something crucial. Silence makes people reveal themselves. Joy Behar clears her throat, attempting to steer the ship back toward safer waters. Well, Johnny, you've been busy creatively, she says, smiling a little too brightly. New projects, new music. Johnny nods, grateful for the lifeline, and starts to answer. He talks about returning to music, about finding peace in quiet studios and late-night writing sessions. His voice steadies. The rhythm returns. For a brief moment, it feels like the storm has passed. But Whoopi watches him closely. She's not done. The audience senses it too. You can feel the collective leaning in, like a held breath that never quite releases. Johnny finishes his thought, punctuating it with a small shrug. At the end of the day, art's what keeps me sane. Whoopi smiles faintly. Not unkind, but probing. Art can be healing, she says. It can also be a shield. Johnny's eyes flick up. There it is again. That subtle pressure. A shield from what? He asks. From facing hard truths, she replies. The word truths lands like a challenge. Johnny laughs, shaking his head. You keep saying that like there's one version. Whoopi leans forward now. Just a little. Enough to shift the power dynamic. There are experiences, she says. And there are consequences. The audience murmurs. Sunny Hostin's lips part slightly, as if she wants to jump in, but she doesn't. This is between them now. Johnny's fingers drum once on his knee, then stop. Consequences, he repeats. I've lived with them. Have you? Whoopi asks. Calm. Measured. Dangerous. The question slices deeper than accusation ever could. Johnny's smile disappears entirely this time. I lost my career, he says. My reputation. My privacy. He stops himself. Swallows. Yeah. I've lived with consequences. A few people clap instinctively, then stop when they realize no one else is joining in. The sound echoes awkwardly. Whoopi doesn't flinch. And others would say they lost safety, she replies. Peace. Their voice. Now the room tilts. The tension sharpens, no longer abstract. Johnny leans forward again, eyes locked on her. So what is this? He asks quietly. A trial? No, Whoopi says immediately. A conversation. Johnny exhales, almost a scoff. Doesn't feel like one. The audience reacts audibly now. Gasps, whispers, the scrape of shoes against the floor. This is uncomfortable. This is real. Whoopi's expression softens just a fraction. Conversations can be uncomfortable, she says. Especially when power is involved. Johnny's eyes narrow. You keep using that word. Because it matters, Whoopi replies. And because people watching at home, she gestures subtly toward the camera, toward millions of unseen eyes, are listening. That lands heavier than anything else so far. Johnny glances toward the audience, then back to Whoopi. For the first time, there's something like vulnerability there. Not weakness. Exposure. I know people are watching, he says. They always are. And what do you want them to understand? Whoopi asks. The question disarms him. It's open. Genuine. For a heartbeat, the edge dulls. Johnny pauses. Long enough that you can hear the faint hum of the lights. That I'm human, he says. That I made mistakes. That I'm not the caricature people decided I was. Whoopi nods slowly. And what about the people who felt hurt? Johnny hesitates. This time, the pause isn't strategic. It's real. I don't dismiss pain, he says carefully. But I won't accept lies. The word lies ripples through the studio like a dropped glass. Sunny finally leans in. Johnny, she says gently. Do you think it's possible for two people to experience the same situation differently, and both feel hurt? Johnny looks at her, then back to Whoopi. His voice tightens. Sure, but only one of us was publicly destroyed. The temperature spikes. Even the audience members who were nodding earlier stiffen. Whoopi's jaw sets. Public scrutiny isn't the same as private harm. Johnny's reply is immediate. Tell that to someone who can't walk down the street. Whoopi raises her hand slightly, not to stop him, but to slow the moment. And tell that to someone who's afraid behind closed doors. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. For a split second, it looks like Johnny might stand up. His body shifts, restless energy coiling tight. He doesn't. Instead, he leans back, crosses his arms, a defensive posture he probably doesn't even realize he's taken. This feels one-sided, he says. Does it? Whoopi counters. Or does it feel unfamiliar to be questioned? That one hits home. The audience reacts sharply, an audible "oh" slicing through the air. Johnny laughs again. But this time there's no humor left at all. You invited me here. And you accepted, Whoopi says. Knowing what people are still grappling with. Johnny shakes his head. I accepted because I believe in dialogue. Then let's have it, Whoopi replies. The cameras zoom closer. Sweat glints at Johnny's temple under the lights. His voice drops. What do you want me to say? He asks. That I deserve everything that happened? Whoopi's voice softens, but the weight doesn't. I want you to acknowledge that fame doesn't erase harm. Johnny stares at her. The audience is silent again. No murmurs now, no whispers. Just attention. I've acknowledged pain, he says. I just won't accept being reduced to a headline. And others, Whoopi says, won't accept being reduced to a footnote. That's the line that fractures the room. Johnny inhales sharply. For the first time, frustration breaks through his controlled exterior. This is exactly the problem, he says. No matter what I say, it's never enough. Whoopi doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Sometimes it isn't about enough. Sometimes it's about listening. Johnny looks away. The gesture is small, but it speaks volumes. Joy tries again to intervene, voice tentative. Maybe we should. No, Whoopi says gently, without looking away from Johnny. This matters. Johnny looks back at her, eyes intense. You think I haven't listened? He asks. I think, Whoopi replies, that listening and hearing aren't always the same. Another murmur ripples through the audience. This is no longer entertainment. It's confrontation stripped bare. Johnny's shoulders sag slightly, like the fight is draining out of him, or sinking deeper. I'm tired, he says. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just truthfully. Whoopi studies him. For a moment, there's something almost like sympathy there. Almost. Tired doesn't mean finished, she says. The studio clock ticks toward commercial. Producers are panicking now. You can almost feel it. Hands hovering over buttons, whispered debates behind the cameras. Johnny nods slowly. I know. The silence returns, but it's changed. Heavier. More fragile. Whoopi glances toward the camera, then back to Johnny. We're going to take a break, she says. When we come back, this conversation isn't over. The audience exhales finally, as the music swells. The camera pulls back. Johnny stares at the floor. Whoopi sits perfectly still. And everyone watching knows one thing for certain. Whatever happens next will not be easy. The lights dim slightly as the show returns from commercial. The audience shifts, restless, aware that something has changed. The room feels smaller now, claustrophobic almost, the kind of tension that presses against your chest and refuses to let go. Johnny Depp sits on the edge of the couch, fingers drumming lightly on his knees. His gaze flicks toward Whoopi Goldberg, who hasn't moved an inch. She leans back now, composed, watching him like a hawk waiting for the slightest twitch. The air between them crackles, electric with unspoken truths. Johnny exhales slowly. He knows what's coming. He's been through hostile interviews before, but none with this kind of precision. Whoopi doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't have to. Every word she speaks carries the weight of intention, like a scalpel cutting through carefully rehearsed defenses. You've faced a lot of judgment, Whoopi begins, calm, deliberate, almost conversational. From fans, from the media, from people who never knew you. How does that feel? Johnny shifts in his seat, the rings on his fingers catching the light, reflecting glints like small warning signals. He swallows, eyes narrowing. It feels, he starts, voice low, deliberate. Like the world has already made up its mind before I even open my mouth. The audience stirs. A soft, collective intake of breath. Phones are raised. Somewhere, a producer's hand hovers over the mute button, uncertain. Even here? Whoopi presses, leaning forward. Even with me? The question hangs like a storm cloud. Johnny doesn't answer immediately. He studies her, gauging, weighing. His jaw tightens, then relaxes. You're different, he admits. I can feel that. But even then, I'm on guard. Always on guard. The pause stretches. Cameras pan the audience, catching faces frozen in anticipation. A young woman whispers, barely audible, "This is intense." Her friend nods, wide-eyed, fingers gripping the armrest. "Guard is natural," Whoopi says softly. "It keeps you safe. But sometimes it isolates you too." Johnny leans back, exhaling through his nose. "Isolation," he repeats, almost to himself. "Yes, I know that feeling well." The tension thickens. The audience senses a turning point approaching. Whoopi's next words are measured, almost teasing, but underneath lies a blade. "And when you're isolated, how do you know what's real?" she asks. Johnny blinks. The question catches him. Not because it's new, but because it's intimate. Dangerous. He looks away for a fraction of a second, then back. "You don't," he admits quietly. "You hope." Hope. A simple word. But it lands like a bomb. There's an audible shift in the room. The audience leans forward as if drawn by gravity. "You hope," Whoopi repeats, her voice soft but steady. "And sometimes hope isn't enough for others. They need closure, understanding, acknowledgement." Johnny's hands tighten into fists on his knees. He swallows, his voice lower this time, almost raw. "I've given what I could. But it's never seen as enough. Because people want certainty," Whoopi replies, calm, almost serene. "They want a story they can follow, a villain, a hero. The real world doesn't always give that. Does it?" Johnny laughs, but there's no humor in it. It's bitter, edged with fatigue. "No, it doesn't." He runs a hand through his hair, his posture stiffening. "And sometimes the story isn't mine to tell anymore. It's told by headlines, by whispers, by the people who never met me." The audience is silent. The words hang, heavy and undeniable. A phone records, a camera zooms in, a producer bites their lip. Everyone feels the shift. This is no longer just an interview. It's exposure. "Headlines," Whoopi repeats. "And yet you agreed to come here." Johnny meets her gaze, dark and intense. "Because I can't control the headlines," he says. "I can control this. This moment." "And what do you hope for in this moment?" she asks, leaning slightly closer, voice almost a whisper now. Johnny hesitates. His fingers drum nervously against his knee. Then he exhales sharply. "Understanding. Recognition. That people see me as more than what they've been told." A murmur runs through the audience. You can almost feel the divide forming. Those who sympathize, those who recoil, all riveted. Whoopi tilts her head slightly, a predator's patience. "And if they don't?" Johnny's jaw tightens. The smile he uses like armor disappears. "Then I keep going. I always have." The tension escalates further. Joy Behar attempts to interject with a light-hearted comment, but the words falter in her throat. Sunny Hostin's lips press together, uneasy. Even the crew behind the cameras can't look away. "You've been under fire for a long time," Whoopi continues, her tone steady but pointed. "People have questioned your actions, your intentions, your character. How do you reconcile that with your own truth?" Johnny's eyes flicker with a storm inside. "By remembering who I am when no one's watching. By holding on to the pieces that are mine alone." "Pieces alone?" Whoopi repeats softly. "And the rest? The world? They don't deserve the truth." He hesitates. The pause is almost unbearable. Then, "They deserve honesty," he says, voice raw. "But they also deserve patience. Patience to understand that people aren't simple." The audience reacts audibly this time. A soft gasp, then murmurs. Cameras shift, catching every subtle twitch. The room is charged, almost vibrating. Whoopi leans back slightly, considering. Patience. Understanding. Honesty. Complicated things for a world that wants simplicity. Johnny nods slowly. Exactly. The room is silent again. The air feels heavy, thick with the unspoken. Every person in the audience, every viewer at home, can sense the tension, but no one dares interrupt it. Let's talk about consequences, Whoopi says next, her voice cutting through the stillness. You've said you've lived with them, but what about the people affected? Do they get a say in your narrative? Johnny's gaze hardens. They always have a say, but no one narrative is the whole truth. There are layers, context, intentions, missteps, misunderstandings. And do you think context matters to everyone? She asks. Johnny exhales, tired now, almost weary. No. Context doesn't matter to most. It's easier to pick a side, label someone, move on. The audience is leaning forward now. You can feel the collective pulse, the anticipation building, like something monumental is about to crack wide open. Labels, Whoopi says slowly. They're powerful. Sometimes they're fatal. Do you fear the label of villain? Johnny's fingers tighten. His voice drops to a quiet growl. Every day. Even here, she asks almost provocatively. Even here, he admits. Even in front of millions. Even with you. The cameras close in on Johnny's face. Every line, every shadow, every flicker of emotion captured for the world to see. The tension is palpable. You've survived storms most would crumble under. Whoopi continues, calm, relentless. Do you ever wonder if the storms have changed you irreparably? Johnny leans back, gaze fixed on a distant point. I wonder, he says softly. But I also know I'm still here. Breathing. Speaking. Fighting. That's proof enough. The audience exhales collectively. The storm hasn't passed, but it's transformed. From confrontation, from tension, from discomfort, something else emerges. Truth, fragile and raw. And still, the air is electric. The cameras roll. The moment is far from over. Because everyone watching knows. The climax, the confrontation that will define this interview, is still coming. The tension doesn't dissipate when the cameras stop rolling. It thickens. Johnny Depp sits back, eyes shadowed, fingers steepled together. The studio lights glare, harsh and unrelenting, but they can't illuminate the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Whoopi Goldberg remains poised, calm as ever, yet every subtle gesture, an eyebrow raise, a tilt of the head, speaks volumes. She's not just hosting. She's orchestrating an unspoken reckoning, and everyone watching can feel it. The audience is frozen in collective anticipation. Phones rise to record, whispers cascade through the rows, some leaning forward in awe, others sinking back in discomfort. The air is thick with electricity, the kind you can almost taste. Every pause, every word exchanged earlier has left its mark. And now, as the final segment unfolds, the confrontation reaches its apex. Johnny exhales slowly, as if drawing in courage from the tension itself. I've spent years explaining myself, he says, voice low, measured, yet tinged with raw frustration. Not to justify, not to argue, but to be understood. And I keep realizing, some people don't want to understand. They want a story, a character, a villain, a hero. But life doesn't work like that. Whoopi leans in slightly, her eyes piercing, unwavering. And yet here you are, in front of millions, choosing to speak anyway. Why? Johnny's gaze locks with hers, unflinching. Because silence doesn't heal. It doesn't change perception. It doesn't allow the truth to exist, even if imperfectly. I came here to claim my own narrative, not rewrite theirs. The words hit hard. Even the hosts sit in quiet awe. Joy Behar exhales. Sunny Hostin presses her lips together, trying to maintain composure. The tension in the studio is palpable, almost suffocating. Whoopi's voice softens, but the edge remains. Truth is complicated. It rarely sits neatly in headlines. And consequences, they ripple. They affect everyone involved. That's why it matters how you speak, how you act, how you take responsibility. Johnny leans forward, voice dropping into a quiet intensity that commands attention. I take responsibility for what I've done, for mistakes I've made. But I will not be defined solely by the narrative that others choose for me. Not here. Not anywhere. The audience is silent, a collective intake of breath so loud it could be heard if recorded. Cameras zoom in, capturing every line etched into his face, every subtle quiver in his hands, every flicker of emotion in Whoopi's calm but piercing gaze. The energy is cinematic, almost unbearable. Then a beat. A pause long enough for time itself to feel suspended. Whoopi leans back slightly, allowing the weight of her next words to hang. And now the world watches, and will decide what to believe. But remember this, words carry power. They build. They destroy. They heal. And tonight, you've chosen to speak yours. Johnny exhales, a sound that seems to release years of pent-up tension. That's all I can do, he says, softer now, almost vulnerable. Speak. Honestly, hope it's heard for what it is, not for what people want it to be. The audience erupts, not in applause, not in laughter, but in a cacophony of reactions, murmurs, gasps, whispers, and the faint hum of phones recording for posterity. The moment has transcended mere television. It has become a cultural event, a collision of fame, perception, and raw humanity. As the show cuts to credits, social media ignites instantly. Clips explode across platforms. Johnny's quiet intensity, Whoopi's calm yet unyielding presence, the charged silence between their exchanges. Memes flood Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Debate threads stretch for miles. People take sides. People argue. People dissect every gesture, every inflection, every pause. Hashtags trend worldwide within minutes. Hashtag Depp vs. Goldberg climbs faster than any entertainment story in recent memory. News outlets scramble for analysis. Podcasts dissect each exchange, breaking down what Johnny meant versus what Whoopi implied. Op-eds speculate on the fallout, the implications, the lasting narrative shifts. It isn't just an interview, it's a flashpoint. A cultural earthquake shaking perceptions of celebrity, accountability, and public narrative. Back in the studio, the aftermath is palpable. Crew members exchange quiet, amazed glances. Producers shake their heads, knowing this episode will dominate headlines for weeks. Johnny sits quietly, absorbing the intensity, drained yet resolute. Whoopi sits poised, serene, knowing she's just guided a conversation that will reverberate far beyond these studio walls. Outside, the world reacts. Social media explodes with debate. Was Johnny justified? Was Whoopi too confrontational? Did the audience witness a confession, a challenge, or simply truth laid bare? Every comment, every clip, every gif magnifies the conversation, pulling viewers further into the drama that unfolded. And yet, beneath the chaos, one truth remains unmistakable. No one left that room unchanged. Not Johnny. Not Whoopi. Not a single person in the audience. And certainly not the millions watching at home. This confrontation wasn't just a clash, it was a revelation. A reminder that celebrity, power, and public perception are far more complicated than headlines suggest. That accountability, truth, and nuance coexist uneasily under the glare of the spotlight. That moments like this, rare, explosive, cinematic, define culture as much as any film, any award, any scandal. So what do you think? Was Johnny right to defend himself so fiercely? Or was Whoopi the voice of accountability? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your opinions, debate, and weigh in. And make sure to subscribe to Fame and Frame for more shocking, cinematic stories from the worlds of celebrity, drama, and unfiltered truth. Because the story doesn't end here. It only echoes louder with every viewer, every share, every conversation.